Hi everyone, Diane here. Do you want to paint beautiful, loose watercolor leaves for your florals or just for relaxation? If you think expensive brushes are the answer to creating amazing, beautiful leaves, I want to suggest you think again. Because today I'm going to show you some crazy game-changing techniques using broken brushes, sharp sticks, and other unexpected tools. These tricks will add excitement, texture, and energy to your paintings, plus they're incredibly fun to try, and best of all, they cost you nothing. So let's get started. In front of me here I have a mug with a crocheted cozy on it, and in the mug is a pile of junk, basically. But this isn't junk. This is actually really useful stuff. And this is tip number 1, never throw anything away. I know most of you are exactly like me. You never throw anything away. And here I've just gone through some things which I have in a drawer, which is labeled old watercolor brushes. And I'm just going to show you what I do with these old watercolor brushes. We are going to make a painting today, which is going to be one of our sort of doodly type of things. But I thought it would be fun to try to discover some of the little tips and tricks and things and stuff that I have done over the years in order to create lines, dots, shapes, and things like that in my paintings. So here, what have we got? The first thing I ever used was one of these brushes, which I hope you can see. I need to get rid of this paper here. I'll just open it up so that you can see where we're going to do some work. And yeah, so I'll put those back in there. Excuse my tatty old jumper. I'm going to put it in the bin tomorrow, but I've been using it to paint the bedroom walls. Here we have a brush. This is something called a connoisseur. It's a 1/2-inch brush flat from Japan. And I bought this because of the end. You see how pointed that is? It's been cut off at an angle. So it doesn't, although it's round, it's been sliced off like that. I've also got another one, a little bit bigger, same kind of deal. And the idea behind that was, at the time, and I think it's still a good idea, this is a Daler one. This one is, as I said, a connoisseur. Both of them are flat washes. At that time when I bought those, a long time ago now, I used to use a lot of flat brushes. I don't use very many flat brushes nowadays, but that wasn't the real point. The point was I was attracted to the unusual shape. I realized later, of course, that if I wanted an unusual shape at the end of my brush, I could chew it until it fell to pieces, for example. I'm not quite sure how this happened. I think it might have had something to do with the dog. But somebody chewed the end off of this brush, but it does have uses to which we will come back shortly. The other thing which I have, which is a very old brush here, this is one that I left in a jar of water for some time. And then I think I might have used it for glue. Because it still seems to have glue in the hairs. You know, over the years, you collect a whole bunch of brushes that you've mistreated and abused. But this one, look, if I just pull gently, it becomes 2 pieces. And here we have a nice round stamp. And this can be very handy for making circles on your painting. So that has a use too. So we put that to one side. And then there is the twig. This is just a twig. I don't know how long I've had this, a long time actually. And I've got 2 of them and I use them for scratching out quite often. So they live with me and I think they've probably even moved from a different country. I think they might have come from England originally. Another nifty tool that I use for scratching out is a bamboo carving knife, I suppose you'd call it. It's just made from bamboo and it's designed for potters to incise lines into the clay. But it's also extremely good for drawing on your paper. So that's another thing. Then we have something which is traditionally used for lines, a dip pen. This is a traditional one which has a nib that comes off. I use these with ink, but also I use them, and I'm going to show you how I use these all in a minute. I use them also for incising into the paint. Then I have a lovely feather here. I think this is probably from a pigeon or a crow or something like that. There's always, a feather outside. If I need a feather, I just go outside and pick one up. And that, of course, the quill part is really wonderful for drawing lines. Then we have a knife. This is just an ordinary, what do you call it, knife, one of those ones that you can break the sections off so it always remains sharp. You can use that to scratch into your painting, but it's a little bit too sharp really. So what I would recommend you do with this is the following. You are bound to have somewhere in your collection, after you've been painting for a few years, a poor brush that you have forgotten and left in water, and before that's before too long it gets wet and all the paint flakes off. It's still flaking off of this one, but never mind. Okay, you can't really use that for painting anymore and the hairs are all finished, but what you can do is this. You go to the other end and you sharpen it up, so you can just make a point at that end. We've all done this before, haven't we? We used to sharpen our pencils like this until they invented pencil sharpeners, which are much easier. I've got a nice rotary one here, which is great. And you just carry on doing that until you've got a lovely point. Right, so you can see that up against that feather, lovely point. And I have another one here that I did earlier. This is possibly the very best tool of all for drawing lines into your paint. So that's that. And then I've got another lovely brush here, which is a rigger, but it's an old rigger, and all the hairs have gone haywire. And that I think would be quite nice for drawing things like stamens and stuff like that coming out of the center of a poppy, for example. And then I've got this one, which is a children's brush used for actually gluing, and it comes with a natural, really quite sharp point on that end. So if you had something like that that you could use, that would make a nice thick scratching out. So whatever you've got in your drawer or anywhere in your house that you think you could adapt, and there are many more other alternatives and options too, but this is just some of the things that I've pulled out this morning. And this is tip number 1. Never bother to paint veins into your leaves because it's much better to scratch them out. Right? So let's do a few leaves. We often talk about paintbrushes needing to have nice sharp points. And I think for one of the reasons why we need a brush with a nice sharp point, which you don't see until it's wet, is for painting leaves, because we want to be able to pick up some paint and touch the brush down with the very end and create a point. So I don't know until I try whether or not this one is going to be good. I'm pretty sure about this one, but I have a drawer here full of brushes. I'll show you. This is a recent acquisition of mine. It's a little chest of drawers with these very slim, they're only half an inch deep, but they hold the brushes very well lying down, which is the way they should be stored. That comes from Meaden, actually. Hang on a sec. That comes from Meaden, actually, which is really nice. There's 3 drawers there in a little stack with an easel at the top. And so, yes, right, I am going to pick up some green here. A nice green, if I can find some green in my set. Just going to make a nice dark green. And I shall sit down for a second and we'll have a little go at practicing some leaves. So, as I said, I'm testing this brush and we will put down the point. And my tendency is when I do the second stroke of the leaf, I come in below that sharp point and then I finish before the other end, okay? Because the alternative is to do the sharp point and then you try and do it again and it goes blunt. Well, that's okay too, but if you do want it to be sharp, it's better to do one line and then, one line and then below it, come down like that. And I'm going to go back and make these fatter because our whole point here is to try to put in nice veins, so we need a bit more space to work on. So don't worry about, especially if you're using Kuretake paints, you don't need to worry too much about backgrounds, really. And anyway, I think there's a lot to recommend a background, really. They can make life more interesting. So this is a draw well brush. I like the draw well brushes. This one, I don't think the point is terribly brilliant. It might be a bit old. We all become a bit pointless the older we get, don't we? So I'm going to try the Princeton. This is a size 8 Princeton Aqua Elite. And you can judge for yourself what you think. If you can see any difference. I think it probably holds a bit less paint, actually. I haven't spent a lot of time comparing my brushes in a systematic way, which I probably should. I'm a bit more of a haphazard kind of painter than perhaps some of you are. And so I think I've learned to be like that because I have to paint quickly. But this is working very nicely. I don't see anything wrong with that at all. Another brush that we could use, this is a Princeton Neptune, size 8, I think. Yes. Right, so we'll compare that with these three here, shall we? It's definitely softer than the Aqua Elite, but that is not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's a matter of taste, really. I think it's possible that this might be a nice curvy sort of brush. I do think the Princeton brushes are pretty good. I'm sure they'd be very pleased to know that I approve of them. So now I'm going to go back up to the top here and start trying to draw in veins with my various implements here. So let's start with the first one that I ever had that I used for scratching out, which is this brush, which you use the end to. And what happens is when the paint is still fairly dry, wet, you get darker lines, which is absolutely brilliant for leaves, honestly. And what you can do if you want, while it's wet like that, you can, if you want to give it a bit more texture, you can just dab over the top of it and lift some of the paint off. So that's a kind of alternative. So you could either leave it like it was and eventually it will dry with the darker lines, or you can do what I just did with the paper towel. And you can use this, the end of this brush to make thick lines too, if you turn it over. So you've got either the narrow side or the wide side. So this is a fairly versatile sort of brush for that. It's probably also quite good for painting with, even though it's old and battered, I don't know. Will it paint me a nice leaf? Well, probably not. Let's put a bit more paint on it, poor thing, it's been deprived. Nothing wrong with that really, is there? And we can use it on its side to give ourselves a little stem like that. Okay, so well, maybe I should... The thing is, you can't paint with every brush, can you? And when you acquire new ones, you sort of put the old ones to one side and they languish in the drawer and they get upset because they're not being used. Okay, let's try the feather. And I'm going to have to turn this around a little bit. So the feather will give us a narrower but slightly more textured line. And if you press harder, you get a darker line. And if you press more lightly, you get a lighter line. So this is one of my favorites, actually, I have to say. I need to move on quickly because these are all going to dry and then we won't get any lines. So once they start to dry, when you scratch in, you're going to get a lighter line, right? So you know that your paint is drying once that starts to happen. This one, I think, is quite fine and doesn't really make as much impact, but it will, as it dries, get darker. Let me see, what have I not used? My sharpened stick, that's right, my sharpened stick, which is one I like. Let's try that. There we are, we've got a nice light line coming up there. See how nice and smooth that is? I think that's pretty good. And where this one is a little bit damper still, we're getting a dark line. But this is perfect. This is a perfect scratching out tool, it has to be said. What haven't I used? I haven't used my twig. This is going to give me a rougher line. But that feels nice and organic when you use that. There has a certain amount of flex in the stick, really. So you get a kind of, I don't know, a bit of biofeedback there. And what else haven't we used? We've used that, we've used that. Did I use this one? No, I didn't. This is a heavy old brush, this one is. And that still works. It's not worn out yet. The only one that didn't come out very well was that one, and I do think that was probably mostly the fault of the paint because it wasn't very wet. But if we paint over the top of it, then all of a sudden, the lines that we created using the dip pen all appear, and we can see that it did work after all. And same thing, probably even if I just use water on this one, we'd get a similar kind of effect. Yeah. So because of the style of painting that I do, which is more or less modern watercolor, which is not what you would call botanical style, everything's a little bit loose and so on and so forth. This kind of way of doing your veins works perfectly because you don't want it to be all kind of lined up perfectly, exactly the same as it is in nature, really. So I'll put a few more in there. The other thing that you can do with these sticks, if you do a leaf or something, and it's going to be one that you are going to do in a whimsical kind of way, there's nothing to stop you from using a stick to actually draw into your leaf. So, for example, the sharpened stick could come out here and we could do spirals into the leaf or any other shape. It doesn't have to be a leaf. And then we can do the center vein, and on this side we could do parallel lines down here like this. You do anything and everything that you like, you can do with a stick. So let's make this, I'll give this one a bit of a stem. And with leaves, you can either start at the top and come down towards the stem, or my preferred way really, although it's just because it's lazier, is to come up from the bottom, like that. And you can do this cool thing where you put your brush up against your stem when you're starting out, and you get this lovely back flow into the stem. So if I was to take some black, for example, and touch it there, I mean, that is so cool. I really like that effect. You can't say fairer than that, can you? And And then we'll just put a nice dark one up here with a broken green and black colour. When you do this, you forget all about your troubles and your woes. If you woke up this morning feeling a bit depressed, like I did, you don't need to hang on to that. You can just drop a bit more in. This is the drop wash technique, where you're just dropping in. That's beautiful. This one could take a bit more out. There is nothing, I don't think, better than just painting sprigs of leaves. We do a lovely curve, a lazy S, as Hugh Brading used to say. And we're just dropping our leaves. Put these ones much closer. But you could have a nice long stem like that. It looks quite elegant, doesn't it? Okay, I'm gonna. I think I'll leave those ones because I quite like those the way they are. They don't absolutely. Your leaves don't have to have veins. They don't have to. And I'm going to put a little bit more black into these ones because I like doing it. And then we'll give those ones a bit of a scratch, I think. And you choose your favourite, right? You choose your favourites. And this is lovely and fine, the feather. For this kind of painting, it's nice if you've got 100% cotton, but you don't have to have 100% cotton. I've got a cheaper version, hang on a sec, that Meaden have just sent me actually, which is 50% cotton. And that I'm sure, we'll try it in a sec, I'm sure that'll be absolutely fine for this kind of thing. I don't know whether this will scratch out. Might be a bit too late. Yeah, a bit. But so there we are. There are some leaves, and quite happy about those. They've turned out nicely. Let's just try this 50% watercolor paper and see what happens. Let's also carry on with this nice Neptune brush. Lazy S, and let's put in, and you can judge for yourself whether there's any difference. I think the texture of paper is slightly different. I think we'll see whether we still get the same effect. Maybe it's not quite so good, the flowing effect. Perhaps it's not quite as good. I think that's possibly true. But still, if you're just practicing your strokes, you know, getting a point, making the shape happen, because we all make mistakes, and so we need to practice. I think Strathmore have got some really good paper at a very good price, if I remember rightly. And there are other Chinese manufacturers as well that have inexpensive paper. Okay. Yeah, well, I think the flowing is a little bit less, but it might just be me. It might be just I'm not used to it. Okay, so shall we scratch a few of those out as well? I'm just deciding which to use. I think I might use the long pointed stick, the one I just sharpened. As you do this, try to sort of give it a bit of a curve, which will show your leaf as being, you know, a bit more organic. You can also, of course, do dots, which will give you some more texture. When that's actually dry, that will be covered with sort of dots. And I was going to show you the stamping effect, right, with these two damaged pieces. So this one, we take the head off and we have a nice circle. So I'm going to wet that a little bit and then dip it into the paint, press it into the paint, and then keep my fingers crossed, and we will get circles. Nice textured circles, which you could use as berries on your branches. If you have a problem with drawing circles, which we all do some days, you can do this. I don't suggest that you actually destroy a brush, but this one had definitely seen better days. So we can do, I think that's great fun. They're all circular. You just give it a little wiggle to make sure that it indents all the way around. And then if you wanted to, you could, of course, pick up a little bit of shadow colour, some black mixed with green, and you could just drop a little bit more colour into one side. And the paint that you drop in won't go outside of the circle that you've indented with the brush end. Not end really, well, the inside of the brush. So we can do that. Okay, so there's that. And the other one, the other broken brush, was this one. And this one, I'm pretty sure, I think we had a puppy at the time, and I think this was a very expensive little brush. It was German. Yeah, it says West Germany. So that shows how old that is, because I think the Berlin Wall came down in about 1987 or something. I was actually in Germany at the time. But this actually says West Germany on it, which ceased to exist as of that moment. And it's a Kalinsky sable. And it's really, I only keep it because it has, I'm not going to paint with it, because it has sort of, you know, what's the word? We keep these things for sentimental reasons. That's it. Okay, so I'm going to put that aside and we will just try dipping piece of paper. Not that. Oh, here we are. Right, we'll just try dipping this end into some liquid paint and see what happens. And I think this would also be useful. You can rotate it to get a different print, and it'd be useful as a kind of floral structure, if you see what I mean. I know that that is green. But for the back, you know, when we're doing our loose doodly paintings, I'm going to put some red on there. When we want a textured background, this kind of brush that has been damaged, I suppose this is a little bit, oh, it's starting to look like clover or something like that. It's a sort of mixed media kind of way of painting, isn't it, when you start doing things like that? So yeah. Nothing ever ceases to have a use somewhere. Okay, so I think that section is finished now, and I'm going to go and have lunch, and then I'm going to come back and I'll do the second half of the video, which is going to be our relaxation painting using some of these tools that we've just been exploring. So I'll see you shortly. Okay, so we're going to do our leaves now with a few berries and stuff like that. So let me see, which brush shall I use? Difficult to know. I'll go eeny, meeny, macaracca. I think I tell you what, I'm going to use the one I don't use very often, which is the Princeton Neptune. I think I might use that today. And here we have, you can just see this piece of paper here, so I can try out my colours there. I have got what I call a restricted palette. I call it that because that's what it's called. And we've got cobalt violet and imperial violet, these two here. I think that one's cobalt and that's imperial. So those are two slightly different violet colours. Those are both from Kuretake. Then I've got also from Kuretake, I have got yellow ochre. And the other colour that we have here, if you can call it that, is black. So those are the colours that we have, and that's what I'm going to stick to for this painting. And really, why? Well, because, you know, it's easier to paint with few colours. So let us pick up a couple of different mauves. I'm just going to put some in each of these little squares, well, rectangles, whatever you want to call them. And you don't have to do this bit if you don't want to, but it's just useful for you to be able to see what I'm working with. It's just a starting point. Okay, so we have our 4 colours there, just as a starting point. And I'm going to, first of all, with the yellowish colour, the yellow ochre or raw sienna or something like that, and perhaps a little bit of black, I'm going to put in what we could call a lazy S. Lazy because it's not very well shaped. So then I'm going to wash my brush a bit. Somebody said to me the other day, oh, I noticed that you don't wash your brush off properly before you go to the next colour. And she wondered why. I haven't answered that question. But if you're listening, the lady who asked that question, it's just that I quite like the colours to blend. So I don't bother really with washing my brush, because like that one there, it has a little bit of black in it, which often improves the whole thing. And I'm not planning this at all. I'm just, basically the first few leaves that I do are going to be lighter in colour. And this is just a play, so it really doesn't matter, because it's not going to go in the Royal Academy, I don't think. And if you watch the way I create my brush strokes, you'll see better than I can ever describe what I'm doing. So this brownish colour here is a random mixture of purple and yellow ochre. And you can see the more yellow ochre that, well, the richer the colour, let's say, the browner it goes. It's amazing, isn't it? So we'll go back a little bit to purple here. But all of these are a little bit light. And then I'm going to pick up a bit of black. I'm just going to drop a little bit of black into the base of the leaves, perhaps not all of them, and we'll see what happens to that. Now, you could go in at this point and scratch in your veins into these ones if you wanted to. So I'm probably going to do that. This is a sharpened brush, an old brush that has lost the will to paint. And I'm just going to scratch in using the pointed end. You can barely see that, but as you watch, you can see that it is going darker. The line is going darker, and yet it's quite a nice fine line. All right, so let's pick up another colour for the second branch, which is, looks like I drew something in here. Okay, and we'll go to the purple again. If you're anything like me, by the time you get started on something like this, you've forgotten all about the fact that your husband said, "Could you cut my hair for me at 5:30?" I'm like, yeah, okay. And it's now 5:15, and he's going to have to wait a bit. Because, you know, I'm just enjoying these lovely, smooth. This is a nice brush, I have to admit. It's a little bit different from the Aqua Elite. It has a little bit more of a sensuous kind of feel to it. Okay, so then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to put in some darker colours. So I'm going to mix some black with the purple and some of the yellow ochre, and see what happens there. And I'm going to have a go at going a little bit behind. And we'll put some smaller ones with this nice, rather soft, beigey brown colour. That is a nice brown, actually. And we could add a bit more purple. And we could have a few really dark ones, which always make the light ones stand out more. You can, of course, put your veins in using the tip of the brush if you want to. Don't have to scratch them all in. So we'll leave it like that for the minute. And then I've got this idea of doing some stamping, really, which is using the wooden inside of this brush. I've taken the hairs off. Those are actually almost like bristles. And I'm going to stamp some circles. So what I need first of all, though, is a line. Well, maybe I don't need the line. Perhaps I'll put the line in afterwards. I'm going to dip that in water, And then I'm going to try to make some interesting berries, and we'll see how this goes, because this is something I have not really done before. So we just join those on a little bit, and maybe we'll do some smaller ones on the other side. Let me just draw a fine line, try to use a little bit of self-control here. Not easy. I'll do some partials here. I think that's quite fun. I wonder if I can find a smaller one to do. Oh, look, there's a rubber, otherwise known as a eraser. So we can do some smaller ones using that. And then I'm going to find, if I can find a smaller one still. Oh, that's exciting, isn't it? Pencil. There we go. And let's brush. Let's mix up a bit more of that colour. And we will dip our pencil in there. Yep. And we can actually use a pencil to do the stalks at the top, where it's fragile. That'd be nice. Okay, so that's that. And then we might want to do another one up the middle there. So you could, in fact, use a dip pen to pick up some colour. I'm not sure if this is going to work. Might not be wet enough. Let's see. Probably won't work. Maybe we could try this. I'm just trying these things out, you know. Okay, that's enough to be starting. And then we'll do some more berries over here. When you have an idea like this, as you're doing it, you're thinking, oh yeah, you know, next time I'll do it in a slightly different way or whatever. But you have to start somewhere, don't you? So we'll just put a few on the leaves there. And I'm just wondering, I think I'm going to pick up some really light, I'll get rid of that because I need that space, a little bit of really quite light yellow ochre to put in behind. Just to kind of fill in the gaps. some over here. Make some of these berries yellowish, I think. That'd be quite good, quite fun. And then we can take our pencil again, and just because, you know, it's quicker. I quite like pencil marks on my paintings. Some people don't like them, they don't think they belong, but I do. I think they do belong. So then we need to get some more lines into these ones here. That's also something you can do with a pencil. I can't use the scraping out method at the moment because I think, anyway, the paint has dried too much. Yeah, so what we can do there, we could put some white. If we wanted to, could use a white pen, for example, or we could use a black pen, come to that, or we could use gold. So that's quite nice, actually. These very dark ones. We can come in with a gold pen. We can put in some veins. Like that. And perhaps we can put gold on these ones, or you could put black, actually, might be better. Maybe fine, quite fine black. And maybe a few circles. I mean, you could take this a long way. You could start outlining some of the leaves. You can, you know, emphasize your stalks. It can turn into completely different painting if you start using pen on top of the watercolor. So, you know, you could stop where we had got to, or you can just, you know, just a few really. It doesn't have to be ink on every square inch, and you certainly don't need to stick to the lines. I think it's definitely better if you don't. I don't know why, but it just looks, I don't know, it's a deconstruction type of thing. Isn't it? Because we live in a deconstructed world. It's all going to change, you know. It's all going to change. We're going to start reconstructing the world soon, and then we'll have to learn how to paint more accurately, but that's for another year. At the moment, deconstruction is us. I hadn't thought about that before, but I think there might be something in that. I have to have a... We're going to start doing a podcast, by the way, and those are the kinds of things that we might start talking about if we can think of anything sensible to say, you know. And I might go over some of these little doodahs up here to make them stand out a little bit. Yeah, so watch out. There's a podcast tab on YouTube, and we've started off by putting some of our long videos in there. The playlists, you can put playlists in there. So we've put, I think the first one went up yesterday, and you've seen those before. They're not new, but we had to try starting somewhere. But if you're a member of Patreon, then next Friday, this Friday coming, we're going to be doing a live chat, and that is an actual us. That will be me and Tamsin talking about something, and you will be able to type in your questions or comments on anything that we say. You have to be in the right level of Patreon. So you can go over there and check it out, or you can send us an email. Okay, well, I think I'm getting to the point now where if I don't go and cut my husband's hair, he's going to have a fit. So I think that's probably enough line work. It'll be enough to be going on with anyway. And so I hope you enjoyed that little trip through my archives of materials that I have known. And yeah, so I'll let you go now, and I will see you again soon. So there we are. And the previous ones that we had done were this one, and this one that we started off with. So there we are. I'll let you go, and I'll see you again soon. Bye for now, everybody. Bye-bye.